You're listening to Marketing Spark, the podcast that delivers insight, tools, and tips from marketers and entrepreneurs in the trenches in 25 minutes, more or less. LinkedIn has had quite the year, emerging as an engaging social platform that drives content, connections, and conversations, and shedding its reputation as a place for headhunters and job seekers. So, how did this happen? To find out, I reached out to Liam Darmody, Director of Revenue Operations for HomeSnap. Liam has established himself as a leading voice on LinkedIn and, as important, a go-to resource for people looking to capitalize on LinkedIn. Given LinkedIn's growth this year and how people are using it, I wanted to connect with Liam to look back and, as important, look forward. Welcome to Marketing Spark.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, first, happy holidays. I hope you're enjoying some time off before we get back into it next week.
I am indeed. Same to you. I've taken the week to just kind of decompress from craziest year ever and take it in and then prepare for the upcoming year, which hopefully will be much better. Can't really be worse, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, both of us are half full, kind of glass full kind of people, so hopefully it will be a better, happier, and healthier year. So you and I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. It's been awesome this year, and we're going to talk a lot about the platform and how it's evolved and how to get value out of it. But before we do that, when you're not on LinkedIn, and it seems to be like you're on it a lot like I am, what's your day job? What do you do to make a living?
Yep. So I've been in the technology startup scene here in Washington, D.C. area for pretty much my entire career. I graduated from college here in 2005. Started out as a recruiter at a startup tech firm, and then went to work for a few different startups in the area. And I've always kind of been the sort of jack of all trades, master of none, so to speak, which is a good thing for a lot of startups because things change so quickly, and it's always kind of a moving target, and you need people that can be agile and really adaptable, right? So that's kind of how I got into the role that I'm in now. I've evolved sort of over the years to be in revenue operations. Currently, I'm working for a company called HomeSnap, which is a real estate productivity tool for agents, realtors. And we're responsible basically there for aligning sort of sales, marketing, and customer success and customer support teams, kind of like a project management function within the organization. And it's a great company, phenomenal culture. I love it there. We had a banner year this year, and we're looking for a really great year in 2021. So that's been really exciting for me. Operations is a passion of mine because I like solving problems, and I like people, and I like communicating and collaborating. And that's really what operations is mostly about in my experience.
So LinkedIn to me has been a very interesting place. Now, prior to the end of April, when I lost my job due to the pandemic, I didn't spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. It was a place where I would go from time to time, maybe when I was looking for a job or just poking around. It wasn't a place where I looked for content. It certainly wasn't a place where I had lots of connections, but most of those people I had met at conferences or had, they were friends and things like that. But when I was footloose and fancy free from an employment perspective, there wasn't many places to go. So for whatever reason, I decided to check out LinkedIn. I got hooked. Like a lot of people, I spent a lot of time there and have really seen the benefits. And as someone who like me spends a lot of time there and focuses on best practices and really how to get value out of it, what's your take on how LinkedIn has evolved this year? And how and why has it become a social network? Because in many respects, I think that Microsoft, which owns LinkedIn, has to be surprised by how LinkedIn has grown and how people are using it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, there's so many stories of companies that are in the digital space that, this was a banner year, right? Bringing people together and having people, relate to one another is something that, if you have a platform that enables that, it's a really good thing. 2020 was a good year for those companies.
Yeah.
I think, was Microsoft surprised? Perhaps. I think there's always, I sometimes say that LinkedIn kind of has a bit of an identity crisis because, you've got this platform that was created in 2004. So it's been around for such a long time. You've got 700 million users on the platform, but a fraction of those users are monthly active users, and an even smaller percentage, single digit percentage of users are creating content on the platform. And so there's this weird sort of stigma associated with LinkedIn where you're not supposed to post on there, you're not supposed to show emotion, right? It's a professional network. You're supposed to just park your resume on there and make sure that you stay in touch with people that you've worked with. But LinkedIn has sort of coined the phrase "join the conversation" for some years now. And I remember when I first heard it, I was kind of like, "What? Like, join the conversation? What conversation? There's nothing
Right.
happening. There's nothing happening on LinkedIn." But now it's really starting to sort of take stride, right? And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that people genuinely are becoming a little bit more comfortable showing their personal side in a professional social network, right? The fact that we are all hunkered down for the most part, right? Like, networking and I mean, I loved nothing more than being in the office and the banter of the office and running into somebody in the coffee room or the kitchen and going to lunch with people and all of those things that make the professional workplace somewhat personal and enjoyable are gone, right? Like, you just can't replicate them really, at least, not as effectively. And so to me, it makes a lot of sense that a lot of people have sort of found LinkedIn and sort of discovered, oh, well, we can have those types of conversations. We can have those interactions with people on this platform, and really kind of get some of that water cooler banter a little bit, and so I think that's kind of what I might have forgotten the original question,
Rambling
rambled
here.
a little, but yeah, that's what I think.
Well, one of the things that I find interesting is the number of conversations, the number of connections and conversations. So the fact that you and I are doing this podcast is a direct correlation to our activity on LinkedIn. We've connected, we comment on each other's posts, we go back and forth a lot. And people's willingness to be engaged and, as important, have conversations is really impressive. Like, I probably had more than 100 conversations this year via LinkedIn as a result of LinkedIn. And it's been amazing. Let's say I've talked to people, all over the world. But what I do wonder about is what happens when, hopefully soon, COVID fades into the background and we start to go back to the office, even in a hybrid kind of way, when you do get that interactions with your fellow employees, when you can go to events. Do you think that what we're seeing on LinkedIn today will continue? That it's almost like we've given each other permission to connect with each other virtually. And I think that's one of the most impressive things.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I know a lot of people are sort of thinking about it right now. Personally, I think about all of the other industries that have been impacted by technological advancements and the internet, right? And once people have a taste of what it's like to use LinkedIn in the way that you and I have this year, right? Traditional networking just doesn't necessarily make quite as much sense, right? It's a lot more labor intensive. You go to a networking event and you see maybe 200 people, and you walk in, you're like, okay, well, I'm here for 2 hours. I can probably have, a dozen conversations, and of those dozen, maybe 2 or 3 turn into something that makes a lot of sense. And then you have to sort of think, well, who do I want to talk to? And you're scanning the room, and it's an old school approach, right? It's an inefficient, and leave it to an operations guy to sort of figure out like that's inefficient, right?
Right.
And you look at other companies or other industries, right? When you started to be able to do online banking, people were terrified of online banking, right? They didn't want to have their details on the internet. And now, when's the last time you went and saw a bank teller or used an ATM, right? Hailing now that Uber exists, hailing a cab with your hand just doesn't make sense. It's just why would you have to wait for somebody to drive by you and pick you up, right? And I think that networking is kind of like that, right? And to take it a step further, LinkedIn is essentially like the world's largest networking event, right? It's 24/7, 365 if you want it to be. It has no geographic limitations whatsoever, and you have the added advantage of being able to learn a little bit about somebody before you decide to reach out and introduce yourself. And that is something that you don't get at networking events, really, right? And that is where I think the real value lies, is that you can sort of curate your own network and you can expand your network globally, right? And as we continue with sort of the work from home, the fact that so many companies are comfortable with people working from home now, or maybe not comfortable, but have to deal with it, means that, you know, you want to have a global network. You want to have more people that are interested in the things that you are in different places, because geographic location no longer matters as much. It's not as limiting as it once was. So that's kind of, I think people will continue to do it, especially younger generations, right? I think that's the other thing. You've got, people that are in their 20s right now going into the business world. They're used to living their life online. They're not used to holding back. And so I think that will actually drive a lot more conversation on the platform and utilization. And I think those who participate are going to benefit a bunch, and those who do not are going to maybe regret it a little bit.
Yeah, the one thing that struck me is before COVID, I'm a marketing consultant and I have to do a lot of prospecting and meet with people. And then the amount of time and energy that I spent meeting people for coffee. So you gotta get there, you gotta do the coffee meeting, and maybe it works out and you have a great hour-long conversation, or maybe you're 20 minutes in and you realize that it's not going anywhere, or this isn't really a good connection, and then you got to come all the way back, and it's 2 or 3 hours out of your day. And now I think about it, and I do wonder whether I'll ever have a coffee meeting with someone again, unless they're a really great prospect, unless like it's really somebody I want to meet, because we can do that. We can get this connection. Like we can really establish a relationship. So a couple questions for you, just shifting gears in terms of how you and I use LinkedIn is how long have you been active on LinkedIn? And we can define active in different ways. And what's been your approach this year? Have you had sort of a strategy, or has it just kind of evolved as you've gone through the year?
Yeah, great question. So I've been on LinkedIn as long as I can remember, really. I think I think it was created in 2003, and I probably was on it no later than 2005 or 2006. I suspect that I was probably on it in college. Um, Definitely in 2006. But active the way that I am now, only this year. And a lot of that stems from the fact that I spent a lot of time on LinkedIn. I had my wife and I had our daughter in 2019, so about a year ago. She was born in November, and I was at home and I was thinking, I keep seeing all this content on LinkedIn, and I want to learn more about why this trend is happening and why people are taking to LinkedIn. And so I spent a lot of time on the platform in that month, kind of just absorbing and learning. And then in January, my sort of one of my resolutions was to just become a bit more active and build a personal brand, right? You start hearing this term personal branding, right? It's a big buzzword right now, certainly on the LinkedIn network. And so I wanted to learn more about it and see if I could sort of take a crack at establishing one. So, I went all in, and I sort of fell out of love with Facebook and Instagram, kind of just post pictures for my family to see my kids and whatnot. But LinkedIn was a place where I was genuinely finding meaningful information, not just Forbes articles, right? Like thought leaders, people that, you've got Gary Vaynerchuk posting stuff on LinkedIn all the time because he's talking about how massive the organic reach is on that platform. And so that's where you sort of go to find information about things you're passionate about. And I think for people like myself, that's really useful, right? I want to be learning about things that I'm passionate about, things that I care about. And I like the professionalism element of it because it sort of is self-regulated, right? Because people don't want their employers to see them being jerks online,
Or their
right?
cats?
And so there's an element of, it levels up the content a little bit. Now, that's not to say that there isn't plenty of kind of clickbaity spam content that's permeating the platform, but for the most part, you just unfollow people, or you can get rid of that stuff. And so you can really curate your feed on LinkedIn to be pretty relevant to topics that you care about and people that you care about, which for me was really, really beneficial this year. Strategy wise, I coined a phrase, which is pace equals growth. And that's patience, authenticity, consistency, and empathy equals growth on LinkedIn. And So putting out content, not overthinking it too much, right? I think that was something that I struggled with a lot in the beginning. Oh, what are people going to think, and not having to worry about dealing with likes and things like that. Like, it's so, you see all these people that are getting hundreds or thousands of reactions, and you're like, I want that to happen to me, but you have to have patience, right? It has to happen gradually, and you have to kind of establish the things that you care about and establish your voice. And so that's very much what 2020 has been for me. It's been a bit about finding out, really what are those things that I care the most about from a business standpoint. And for me, it's emotional intelligence, it's leadership and empathetic management, the human in human resources, and it's personal branding and LinkedIn connection and connecting with other people. Those are the three things that I kind of have honed in on myself this year. And all of my topics, in some way, shape, or form, the content that I create relates to those. I've posted, I think, 535 posts in a year, which doesn't feel like that much, but I guess it is. And it's just, I say it's like replace Netflix and chill. Like, sometimes I'm just LinkedIn and chill, or I'll be Netflix and chilling, and I'll have LinkedIn on in front of me, and I'm doing two things at once and sort of digesting content. So it's become a hobby for me this year, and that's what's fun about it.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting to me is the content creation side. And you mentioned the fact that you've posted more than 500 times. And from the outside looking in, for a lot of people, that's astounding. They're like, you spent that much time, you wrote that many words for LinkedIn. And when you're in the midst of it and you're having these conversations and you're posting things that you don't really like, sometimes you snap something off and sometimes it's a big think. And I just find LinkedIn to post on LinkedIn to be relatively easy. Now keep in mind, I'm a writer by profession. I spent 15 years as a reporter. So writing 200 words and for a LinkedIn post is pretty easy. I mean, it's, I can breathe and write 200 words. Now, whether those words are any good, that's something that other people can decide. But the content creation side of it is really interesting to me, because you've got people like Dan Sanchez that advocate that you've got to post every single day. And not only that, you've got to post more than once a day. And that's a lot of work. But I am curious about your approach to content and what you think about how people should approach content overall, because if you're not really into LinkedIn and someone says you got to post every day, that can be pretty intimidating.
Oh yeah, 100%. At the end of the day, I think people have to, it's really about not overthinking things, right? And it's hard because there is that stigma associated with it. People think about LinkedIn differently than they think about Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat, right? Back in the day, people would post multiple posts to Facebook every day and they wouldn't think twice about it, right? But there's all this pressure on people to create the right content, or content that their employer approves of, or whatever. And so I think that is a big piece of it, right? You want to be able to figure out what I call it finding your why, right? Like, why are you trying to be on LinkedIn? What are you trying to accomplish? What are your expectations? Do you want to be a thought leader in your space that just, is constantly cranking out content related to that and then getting followers? Do you want to just showcase how you think for potential employers to get more familiar with you, if they're interested in learning about you? Do you just want to have, a place to go and digest information? That's okay too, right? There's no right or wrong way. I think that's the thing, right? Like, it depends on what your goals are and what your expectations are. And for me, what I noticed is that I started to use LinkedIn as an infotainment source. So I would learn information on LinkedIn. I'd learn different perspectives about business and things that I care about. I'd learn from other people, and that sort of ended up getting me entertained. And then as I was sort of on here, engaging with people's content, the comment section of a person that has a large following is typically a pretty fun place to be. You can see all sorts of different perspectives. It's literally like a conversation, right? I kind of view each post on LinkedIn as this like little micro networking event, so to speak, or micro conversation. And that leads to inspiration, right? So you start thinking about, I like this topic. And then I'll just have my running list of notes. And it's like, I'll write about this someday, or I'll write about this someday. And because LinkedIn has that like try not to overpost. There's all that speculation about the algorithm and whether it dings you if you post too many times, etc. People think, okay, well, once a day, maybe twice a day, but not too much more than that. Whether that's true or not, I have no idea. But there's you're able to sort of think about, okay, well, I'm going to build a backlog of things that I want to post about as the inspiration hits. And so I always advise people to really understand what their why is. Find your why, find your inspiration, find your voice, and then find your tribe. And then, let the rest take care of itself.
Yeah, that's great advice. One of the things I wanted to ask you about is the biggest lessons that you've learned about LinkedIn this year. And for me, it's about conversations, because I think there's such a focus on connections and building up that connection count and figuring out whether I should accept connections or who I should reach out to. And I think that the thing that I learned that sometimes gets lost within the whole LinkedIn growth phenomena is the fact that turning connections into conversations. And it's a simple act of reaching out to somebody like you and saying, hey, Liam, I love what you're doing. I love the kind of insight that you're offering about how to use LinkedIn. Would you be open to a conversation? And what has amazed me this year is people's enthusiasm and their willingness to talk. And I have yet to be turned down by anyone, which is, well, actually
Really? That's awesome.
one person turned me down, and I knew that person. And I was totally surprised. I was like, well, this is not the way the game is played on LinkedIn. And so if my lesson to anybody is boo, exactly. Don't be satisfied with connections, because connections are just one way to play the game. It's about the conversations that delivers value.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious about some of the big lessons that you've learned this year from being on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm with you completely on the conversation piece. Sometimes it feels like LinkedIn is, a dating site is the wrong analogy, because that's the antithesis of what LinkedIn should be, even though some men or people forget that that's like the case. But, it is an opportunity to find and meet new people and develop relationships with people that you never would have known existed otherwise, right? I think the phenomenon is that we're no longer limited to our little bubble of who we come across coincidentally in our own geographic sphere, right? We now have the ability to say, oh, I really like this person's, like Mark's content really resonates with me. I'm going to connect with him, so I see it more often. And then we have a conversation about some stuff, and we go back and forth in the DMs, and like, it's like a friend finder a little bit, and I think that in the same way that when dating apps started, people were like, oh, I don't want to be online dating. No, I'm not going to do that. That's pathetic. Blah, blah, blah. Right. But now, like, nobody would think of doing it the other way. It just, the internet helps you connect with people better, right? And LinkedIn is helping you network and build a connection with people in a different way. And I think as the world continues to evolve into a place where physical location matters less than skill, ability, and relationships, that's going to be a pretty powerful thing for the platform. So the lessons that I've sort of learned are that people want to be people want to connect, people want to converse, people want to relate to other people. Some people don't, but most people want to have those conversations around topics that they're passionate about. You can't really get that on other platforms, right? Because there's a discovery element that doesn't exist on the other platforms so much, right? On Facebook, you're kind of connecting with people that you know, and like you have the Facebook groups, which are phenomenal, actually. Like their groups functionality is way better in my experience than LinkedIn's. But you are able to find people. You find your tribe. That's sort of the coin that was the phrase that was coined by Brian Schulman, who's like the video king of LinkedIn. And it's right. You find a little tribe of people that you like to talk to and engage with, and you enjoy their content and they enjoy yours, and that's really great. I guess on the flip side to that, I think I've learned that LinkedIn is a business platform, and there are a lot of people there to do business, and a lot of people who are there to do business may just be putting content out or having a persona that they're they know is going to generate revenue for their business, but that's not necessarily their intention, or that they're not necessarily there to be super authentic, or they're just there to sell, right? They're not there to really make relationships. So it all depends about on how you go about finding people and relating to people, and conversing with people, and identifying what their true authenticity and their true intentions are.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing about LinkedIn for people who aren't on LinkedIn yet, which is, I mean, there's 720 million people who have LinkedIn accounts, not to say that all of them use it on a regular basis,
Yep.
but you really have to, going back to your why. Why do you want to use it? And to figure out, like, how do you get value from LinkedIn and, get the most out of the time that you're going to spend on it, whether it's an hour a day or once a week or a couple of days a week. I also wanted to ask you about something that you launched recently called LinkedIn Enthusiasts.
Yep.
I guess you're upping your game, or you're expanding your game, or you're moving into new areas. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what is this thing that you've created, and why did you do it, and where do you hope it will go?
Sure. So Linked Enthusiasts is a basically a page that I created for people that are passionate about the platform, like I am. And there's a lot of people like that out there. And I think for me personally, LinkedIn isn't the only thing that I want to be talking about every day, right? That's not my identity. I care about tech startups. I care about revenue operations, sales, marketing, customer experience. Like, all those aspects of business matter to me a lot. And what I found myself sort of thinking about was, okay, well, you know, how much time do I want to spend talking about LinkedIn on my personal profile page versus, a page that's dedicated just to LinkedIn, right? And so all of those things come into play, right? If I'm not the kind of person that creates content ahead of time. I write down ideas when I have inspiration,
Right.
but I don't create an editorial calendar. I know people that sort of sit down on a Sunday and just bang out all their copy for the week. I can't do that. I'm
Yeah, I
not that.
can't.
I'm not that way. And so,
Yeah.
um, I sort of got to this point where I was saying, okay, well, how am I going to actually talk about the things that I want to talk about without feeling like there's an opportunity cost associated with it, right? And so, if I, if Liam Darmody is, you know, more than just LinkedIn enthusiast guy, like that's who Liam Darmody is, right? But LinkedIn enthusiasm is part of my hobbies, part of my passion, and I think that's why I carved it out separately so that I could post more stuff about LinkedIn without necessarily, taking over my entire profile as just the LinkedIn guy, right? Like, that's not who Liam Darmody is. It's just a piece of me.
Well, the
My wife
ironic thing,
disagree, but
yeah. Well, the ironic thing about writing about LinkedIn is that people love commenting and engaging on LinkedIn,
right.
and that you tend to get caught in this. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you want engagement, you post about LinkedIn, and around it goes. I want to ask you one last question. Earlier this week, I talked a little bit about where I thought LinkedIn would go in 2021, and most of it was focused around monetization, because I think Microsoft/LinkedIn has a huge opportunity to extract more revenue from this business as the platform grows, and some of the things that they'll that I think they introduce. I think video is a huge opportunity for LinkedIn. I think analytics for personal accounts is a huge opportunity for them to add value and maybe monetize it. And curious about how you think the platform will evolve this year, and whether monetization will be something that it will pursue, and whether you expect maybe enhanced functionality. I guess there's a lot of things that a lot of people would like to see.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that there's going to be a lot of evolution. If you sort of think about it, this new path of LinkedIn, it's basically like being a bit of it's like being a startup with 700 million users, right? And you're trying to engage as many of them as you can, and you're trying to build as much engagement on the platform as possible when the platform wasn't really originally created for that. So your entire user base is not really accustomed to that purpose for your platform. So there's definitely going to be a lot of focus on increasing engagement on the platform. The prompts that they have when you get a message from somebody, things like that. Like, they want to have people on the platform engaging on a regular basis. So I think you're going to see a lot of things like that. I have to also give a shout out to Andy Foote, who is, Mr. LinkedIn Insights. He is a phenomenal LinkedIn trainer, and he had a post recently that was like his predictions for the next year, and he's put a lot of thought into the platform for probably a decade. And he's got a lot of great insights. I think monetization will absolutely be a part of it. I mean, LinkedIn is part of Microsoft. The monetization is going to be important for sure. How they do it, I don't know. And I think there's definitely plenty of avenues in which they can sort of squeeze more revenue out of the platform for sure. I hope that they are able to maintain the integrity of the communication and the relationships that are on the platform, because I think that's where most companies that are in the social space fail. They sacrifice the authenticity of the platform and the relationships in exchange for the ad revenue. And so I think maybe the fact that LinkedIn has been around as long as it has and is part of a much bigger organization that has sort of a longer timeline and a longer runway will give them the unique ability to approach that really cautiously, and sort of take it the right way and make sure that they're balancing, keeping people that are interested in the platform engaged and also making money at the same time.
Okay, one final obvious question. Where can people find you online and HomeSnap as well?
Yep. So linkedin.com /in/link to Liam is my URL for my profile. liamdarmody.co is my website, just a personal website. And the Linked Enthusiast page on LinkedIn is where I'm going to spend all my time nerding out about LinkedIn going forward.
Awesome. This has been a great conversation. Like you, I'm totally all in when it comes to LinkedIn. I've seen tremendous ROI this year, and anybody who's not capitalizing on its potential is missing out on something really amazing. Well, thanks for listening to another episode of Marketing Spark. If you enjoyed the conversation, leave a review and subscribe via iTunes or your favorite podcast app. For show notes of today's conversation and information about Liam, visit marketingspark.co/blog. If you have questions, feedback, would like to suggest a guest, or want to learn more about how I help B2B companies as a fractional CMO, consultant, and advisor, send an email to mark@marketingspark.co. I'll talk to you next time.